Hey everyone, let me set the scene for you. My name's Mike, and I'm a 42-year-old IT professional living in the suburbs. My wife Sarah is 39 and works as a dental hygienist. We've been married for 15 years and we have two kids, Emma, 12, and Jack, 10. Life was pretty routine. Work, kids, weekend BBQs, until I found myself caught in a storm I never saw coming. It all started innocuously enough. Sarah had a routine dental checkup scheduled, nothing out of the ordinary. Her dentist, Dr. Mitchell, was someone we'd both seen for years, a charming guy in his early 50s. Little did I know, this ordinary checkup would lead to a revelation that would turn my world upside down. Our story takes place in a quiet neighborhood, the kind where everyone knows each other and secrets are hard to keep. But as it turns out, some secrets can be very well hidden, even in the most transparent of places. Sarah and I had a pretty solid relationship, or so I thought. We had our ups and downs like any couple, but nothing too serious. However, over the past few months, I'd started noticing subtle changes in her behavior. It began with her being more secretive with her phone, which she never used to be. She would get these random texts at odd hours, and when I'd ask who it was, she'd brush it off, saying it was just a friend from work. Then there were the dental appointments. Sarah's always been meticulous about her oral hygiene, but suddenly, she seemed to be scheduling a lot more visits than usual. At first, I didn't think much of it. Maybe she was having issues with her teeth or gums. But when I casually mentioned it, she got defensive, insisting that it was all necessary and routine. One evening, while we were having dinner, I noticed that she seemed distant, almost preoccupied. She barely touched her food and kept glancing at her phone. I tried to engage her in conversation, but her responses were short and clipped. I couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. "Hey Sarah, everything okay?" I asked, trying to sound casual. "Yeah, why?" she replied, a bit too quickly. "I don't know, you just seem distracted lately. Is everything all right at work?" She sighed. "It's fine, Mike. Just a lot on my mind. You know how it is." I nodded, but her response did little to quell my growing unease. As the days went by, I found myself becoming more and more suspicious. I hated feeling this way, but I couldn't ignore the signs. A few weeks later, Sarah mentioned she had another dental appointment. This one seemed particularly important, as she was unusually excited about it. That morning, she spent extra time getting ready, even putting on makeup and wearing her best clothes. I found it strange. Who gets all dolled up for a dental appointment? "You're looking nice today," I commented, trying to keep my tone light. "Thanks," she said, flashing me a smile. "I just felt like dressing up." As she left, I couldn't help but feel a pang of jealousy and doubt. Was she really just going to see the dentist, or was there something more going on? My mind was spinning with possibilities, each one more troubling than the last. The suspicion gnawed at me like an insidious parasite. I couldn't ignore it anymore. One evening, after Sarah had gone to bed, I decided to check her phone. I hated myself for it, but I needed to know. I carefully took her phone from the nightstand, praying she wouldn't wake up. The first thing I noticed was that she had changed her passcode. My heart sank. This was a clear sign that she was hiding something. The next day, I called in sick to work. I needed to figure out what was going on. I decided to follow her. She mentioned she had another dental appointment, so I waited until she left and then discreetly tailed her. It wasn't hard to do. Sarah wasn't expecting to be followed. She drove straight to Dr. Mitchell's office, just as she said she would. I parked a little way down the street and watched as she entered the building. Nothing seemed out of the ordinary until I noticed that she wasn't coming out. Minutes turned into an hour, and still, she remained inside. Something was definitely wrong. I decided to take a closer look. Entering the building, I noticed a back door marked private. Taking a deep breath, I approached it and heard muffled voices. I couldn't make out what was being said, but the tone was unmistakably intimate. I felt a surge of adrenaline and pushed the door open slightly, peeking through the crack. There they were, Sarah and Dr. Mitchell, locked in a passionate embrace. My stomach churned, and I felt a wave of nausea. It was like a scene from a nightmare. They were kissing, oblivious to the world around them. My mind raced, unable to process the betrayal unfolding before my eyes. I quickly pulled back and leaned against the wall, trying to steady my breathing. A flood of emotions hit me all at once: anger, hurt, disbelief. How could she do this to me? To us? I had to confront her, but not here, not now. I needed a plan. I left the building quietly and drove home, my mind spinning. Once there, I sat down and began to formulate a strategy. I decided to gather more evidence before confronting her. If this affair had been going on for some time, there would be more signs. I needed to be thorough. That night, Sarah came home with the same cheery demeanor as always, completely unaware that I knew her secret. I played along, forcing myself to act normal. The charade was exhausting, but I needed more time. Over the next few days, I started piecing things together. I managed to get into her email account and found a series of messages between her and Dr. Mitchell. They were full of flirtation and plans to meet up. The final piece of evidence came when I found a receipt for a hotel room in her car. It was dated the same day as one of her dental appointments. My heart ached as I read through the messages and looked at the receipt. There was no denying it now. Sarah was having an affair with her dentist. The weight of the betrayal was almost too much to bear, but I knew I had to confront her. I had all the evidence I needed. It was time to face the truth. That Friday night, I decided it was time. I couldn't live with this secret any longer, and I couldn't pretend everything was fine. After the kids went to bed, I sat Sarah down in the living room. She looked at me, sensing something was wrong. "Mike, what's going on?" she asked, her voice tinged with concern. I took a deep breath, trying to steady my nerves. "I need to talk to you about something important," I said, pulling out the printed emails and the hotel receipt. Her eyes widened as she saw what I had in my hands. "What's this?" she asked, her voice trembling. "You know exactly what this is, Sarah," I replied, my voice cold and steady. "I know about you and Dr. Mitchell. I know about the affair." Her face went pale, and she looked down at the floor, unable to meet my gaze. "Mike, it's not what you think," she started, but I cut her off. "Not what I think? Sarah, I followed you. I saw you with him. I read your emails. I found the hotel receipt. Don't lie to me. How long has this been going on?" Tears started streaming down her face. 6 months, she admitted, her voice barely a whisper. It started 6 months ago. The anger I had been holding back finally erupted. "How could you do this to me, to our family? Was it all just a lie?" she sobbed. "It wasn't like that, Mike. I never meant for it to go this far. I was just so lonely. You were always busy with work, and I felt neglected." "Neglected?" I shouted. "I've been working hard to provide for this family. I trusted you, Sarah. And you repay me by sleeping with your dentist?" "I'm so sorry," she cried. "I didn't know how to tell you. I didn't want to hurt you." "Well, you did a great job of that," I snapped, my voice dripping with sarcasm. "What was the plan, Sarah? Were you going to leave me for him? Were you planning to keep this secret forever?" She shook her head. "No, I never wanted to leave you. I love you, Mike. I know I messed up, but I want to make things right. Please, can we fix this?" I stood up, unable to sit still any longer. "Fix this? How do you expect me to fix this? You shattered my trust. How do we come back from this?" She reached out to me, but I pulled away. "I don't know," she admitted, her voice breaking. "I just know that I don't want to lose you. I'll do whatever it takes. Counseling, therapy, anything." I looked at her, the woman I had loved and trusted for so many years, and felt a wave of sadness. "I need time to think," I said quietly. "I don't know if I can forgive you, Sarah. I need some space." She nodded, tears still streaming down her face. "I understand. Take all the time you need. I'll do whatever it takes to make this right." Without another word, I turned and walked out of the room, my mind a whirlwind of emotions. I didn't know what the future held, but I knew that things would never be the same again. That night, I slept on the couch. Well, slept might be an overstatement. I lay there, staring at the ceiling, replaying the confrontation over and over in my mind. The betrayal cut deep, and every time I closed my eyes, I saw Sarah and Dr. Mitchell together. The pain was unbearable. The next morning, I woke up groggy and disoriented. Sarah had already left for work, and the kids were still asleep. I had a few hours to myself, but instead of feeling relieved, I felt a crushing loneliness. I couldn't escape the suffocating thoughts of what she'd done. Throughout the day, I went through the motions of life in a daze. The kids needed breakfast, errands had to be run, but I was on autopilot. Every little thing reminded me of her betrayal. The way she smiled at me, the inside jokes we shared, even the mundane chores we divided. It all felt like a cruel joke. Sarah texted me several times, apologizing again and begging for a chance to talk. I couldn't bring myself to respond. I needed space to process everything. Friends and family noticed my distance and asked if everything was all right, but I couldn't bring myself to tell them. The shame and humiliation were too raw. As days turned into weeks, the initial shock began to wear off, replaced by a dull, constant ache. I found myself fluctuating between anger, sadness, and a hollow numbness. Nights were the worst. I'd lie awake, consumed by a whirlwind of emotions. Rage at Sarah, sorrow for our broken marriage, and an overwhelming sense of loss. One evening, I found myself at the edge of breaking down. I was sitting alone in the living room, a glass of whiskey in hand, when Emma walked in. She looked at me with her big, innocent eyes, and I felt a pang of guilt. She didn't deserve this. Neither of the kids did. "Dad, are you okay?" she asked softly. I forced a smile. "Yeah, sweetie. Just tired." She sat down next to me and hugged me. "I love you, Dad." "I love you too, Emma," I said, my voice cracking. I held her tightly, feeling the weight of my responsibilities as a father. No matter how much pain I was in, I had to be strong for my kids. The next day, I made an appointment with a therapist. I needed help to navigate through this mess, for my sake and for my children's. The sessions were tough. Talking about the affair brought all the emotions to the surface, but it was necessary. I learned to confront my feelings, to understand the depth of my hurt, and to start the slow process of healing. Sarah continued to reach out, trying to apologize, trying to explain. I agreed to attend couples therapy, not because I was ready to forgive her, but because I needed answers. I needed to understand why she did what she did, and if there was any hope of salvaging our marriage. Our first session was brutal. Sarah was a wreck, crying and apologizing, but I was too hurt to empathize. The therapist guided us through the conversation, helping us communicate our feelings. It was a small step, but it was a start. In the weeks that followed, I slowly began to find a semblance of balance. Therapy helped me process my emotions, and I started focusing on myself and my kids. I took up running again, something I hadn't done in years. It helped clear my mind and gave me a sense of control. The road to recovery was long and arduous. There were days when I felt like I was making progress, and days when the pain was as fresh as ever. But through it all, I held on to the hope that, eventually, I would find a way to heal, whether that meant rebuilding my marriage or moving on without Sarah. The journey was far from over, but I was determined to take it one day at a time, for myself and for my kids. As weeks turned into months, the anger I felt towards Sarah and Dr. Mitchell never really faded. Every time I saw her, I was reminded of the betrayal. Therapy helped, but there was still a part of me that wanted them to feel the pain I was enduring. I knew it was petty and vindictive, but the idea of revenge was too enticing to ignore. I started to form a plan. I wanted to expose their affair, to let everyone know the truth about what they had done. They deserved to face the consequences of their actions. The first step was to gather more evidence. I still had access to Sarah's emails and texts, and I used that to my advantage. I took screenshots of their messages and saved them on a flash drive. I also kept copies of the hotel receipts and other incriminating documents. I knew that simply confronting them wouldn't be enough. I needed to hit them where it hurt. Dr. Mitchell's reputation was the perfect target. He was well respected in our community, and exposing the affair would undoubtedly ruin him. One afternoon, while Sarah was at work and the kids were at school, I made an anonymous tip to the local news station. I sent them all the evidence I had collected, along with a note explaining the situation. I knew this was a risky move, but I was willing to take the chance. A week later, the story broke. The local news ran a segment on Dr. Mitchell's affair with a patient. They didn't name Sarah directly, but it was easy for people to connect the dots. The fallout was immediate. Dr. Mitchell's practice took a massive hit, and he faced a formal investigation by the dental board. His reputation was shattered, and he lost a significant number of patients. Sarah was devastated. She came home in tears, clutching the newspaper that detailed the scandal. Mike, did you do this? She demanded, her voice shaking. I looked at her, feeling a twisted sense of satisfaction. What did you expect, Sarah? Actions have consequences. She broke down, sobbing uncontrollably. You've ruined everything. My career, our family. How could you? How could I? How could you? I shot back, my voice cold. You destroyed our family the moment you decided to sleep with him. I just made sure everyone knew the truth. The next few weeks were a blur of chaos. Sarah's colleagues and friends distanced themselves from her. She was placed on administrative leave pending an investigation, and her career was in jeopardy. The kids heard whispers at school, and I had to explain to them in the gentlest way possible why their mother and I were going through such a hard time. Despite the turmoil, I couldn't deny the satisfaction I felt. Sarah and Dr. Mitchell were facing the consequences of their actions, and it felt like justice. But the feeling was fleeting. The satisfaction quickly gave way to guilt and regret. The kids were suffering, and seeing Sarah so broken wasn't as fulfilling as I had imagined. One evening, Sarah approached me with red, puffy eyes. Mike, I know you're hurt. I know I deserve this, but our kids don't. They're the ones paying the price. Her words hit me hard. I looked at Emma and Jack, who had been so confused and hurt by everything. They didn't deserve any of this. My quest for revenge had blinded me to the collateral damage I was causing. I didn't think it would go this far, I admitted, my voice heavy with remorse. I was just so angry, so hurt. Sarah nodded, tears streaming down her face. I know, and I'm sorry for everything. In that moment, I realized that revenge had only deepened the wounds. It hadn't brought me the closure I was seeking. It was time to find a different path, one that might actually lead to healing. For me, for Sarah, and most importantly, for our kids. The confrontation, the exposure, and the resulting chaos had left us both battered and broken. The house, once filled with laughter and love, now felt like a war zone. Our children were caught in the crossfire, and I knew something had to change. We couldn't continue living like this. I had to make a decision about our future, not just for my own sanity, but for the well-being of Emma and Jack. It was time to have an honest conversation with Sarah about where we stood and what came next. One evening, after putting the kids to bed, I found Sarah sitting on the back porch, staring blankly into the night. I joined her, the silence between us heavy with unspoken words. Finally, I broke the silence. Sarah, we need to talk. She looked at me, her eyes weary and red from countless nights of crying. I know, she replied softly. I've been thinking a lot about everything. So have I said. This isn't working. We can't keep living like this, pretending everything's fine when it's clearly not. She nodded, tears welling up in her eyes. I know. I've hurt you in ways I can never take back. And I've hurt our family. I don't know if we can ever truly fix this. I don't either, I admitted. But I do know that we need to figure out a way to move forward, for the sake of Emma and Jack. They deserve better than this. We sat in silence for a moment, the weight of our shared pain hanging between us. Do you want a divorce? She asked, her voice barely above a whisper. The word hung in the air, heavy and final. I took a deep breath, considering my response. I don't know if I want that, but I don't see how we can go back to the way things were. Trust is broken, Sarah. It's going to take a long time to rebuild, if it's even possible. She nodded, tears streaming down her face. I understand. I just want to do what's best for our kids. I don't want them to suffer because of my mistakes. Neither do I said. Maybe we need to take a step back, a separation, to give us both some space to figure things out. We need time to heal and to decide if we can ever make this work again. She looked at me, hope flickering in her eyes. Do you think there's a chance that we could eventually find a way back to each other? I don't know, I replied honestly. But I think we owe it to ourselves and to our kids to try. We'll take it one step at a time, see how we feel, and if we can find a way to rebuild. But for now, I think we need some distance. Sarah agreed, and we decided to take a break from each other. We explained the situation to Emma and Jack as gently as we could, emphasizing that we both loved them very much and that none of this was their fault. It was one of the hardest conversations I've ever had, but it was necessary. I moved into a small apartment nearby, close enough to still be an active presence in my kids' lives. The separation was difficult, but it gave me the space I needed to start healing. I continued therapy, focusing on my own recovery and growth. Sarah did the same, seeking help to understand her actions and the underlying issues in our marriage. Over time, the raw pain of betrayal began to dull. The kids adapted to the new arrangement, and we worked hard to maintain a sense of normalcy for them. Co-parenting was challenging, but we managed to make it work. Months turned into a year, and slowly, cautiously, Sarah and I started to rebuild our relationship. We attended couples therapy, working through our issues with the help of a professional. It was a long and arduous process, filled with setbacks and difficult conversations, but we were both committed to trying. Through therapy, we learned to communicate better, to address our problems openly and honestly. We set boundaries and worked on rebuilding trust, one step at a time. It wasn't easy, and there were times when I doubted whether we could ever truly recover. But we kept pushing forward, for ourselves and for our children. Eventually, we reached a point where we could see a glimmer of hope. The pain of the past still lingered, but it no longer defined us. We had both grown and changed, and our relationship, though scarred, was stronger for it. One evening, as we sat together, Sarah took my hand. "Mike, I know we've been through hell, and I know I don't deserve your forgiveness, but I want you to know that I'm committed to making this work. I love you, and I'm willing to do whatever it takes to rebuild our life together." I looked at her, feeling a mixture of emotions, hope, fear, and a cautious optimism. "I love you too, Sarah. It's going to take time, and it won't be easy, but I'm willing to try, for us and for our family." With that, we decided to give our marriage another chance. It wasn't a perfect solution, and it wouldn't erase the pain of the past, but it was a step toward healing and rebuilding what we had lost. We both knew that it would be a long journey, but we were committed to facing it together. Rebuilding our marriage was a journey fraught with challenges, but it was a journey we both committed to. With each passing day, we took deliberate steps towards healing and restoration. Trust, once shattered, was painstakingly pieced back together, not by grand gestures, but by consistent everyday actions. Our first year post-confrontation was the hardest. We set new boundaries, attended regular couples therapy, and made a concerted effort to communicate openly and honestly. There were setbacks, moments when old wounds reopened, but we faced them head-on. The focus was not on forgetting the past, but on learning from it and growing stronger together. Our children, Emma and Jack, played a significant role in our healing process. Their resilience and capacity for love provided us with a constant reminder of why we were fighting so hard to mend our relationship. Family therapy sessions helped them express their feelings and understand the complexities of adult relationships. They saw us struggle, but they also saw us strive for a better future, which taught them valuable lessons about perseverance and forgiveness. One sunny afternoon, about 2 years after the initial confrontation, we decided to take a family trip to the beach. It was something we hadn't done in years. As we walked along the shore, watching Emma and Jack play in the waves, Sarah squeezed my hand. "Thank you for giving us a second chance," she said, her voice filled with emotion. I looked at her, seeing not just the woman who had hurt me, but the woman who had fought alongside me to rebuild our life. "Thank you for fighting for us," I replied. That day on the beach marked a turning point. It wasn't that everything was suddenly perfect, but we had reached a place of mutual respect and renewed commitment. We had survived the storm and found a new normal, one built on a stronger, more honest foundation. Reflecting on the journey, I realized how much I had learned. I had learned about the depths of my own resilience, the importance of communication, and the necessity of forgiveness. Not just for Sarah, but for myself. Holding on to anger and resentment had only hurt me more. Letting go was an act of liberation. Sarah had changed too. She became more open, more communicative, and more aware of her own vulnerabilities. We both understood that our marriage would always be a work in progress, but we were willing to put in the effort to make it thrive. Life moved forward. Our children grew. We faced new challenges, but we faced them together. We celebrated our small victories and navigated our setbacks with a sense of unity we had never had before. Looking back, I wouldn't say I'm grateful for the pain we endured, but I am grateful for the growth that came from it. It reshaped our lives and brought us closer in ways I hadn't imagined possible. As I sit here, writing this and reflecting on our journey, I feel a sense of peace. Our marriage isn't perfect, but it's ours, and we fought hard for it. The scars from the past are still there, but they are a testament to our strength and commitment. In the end, the betrayal that once seemed insurmountable became a catalyst for profound change. It forced us to confront our issues, to communicate better, and to prioritize our relationship in ways we hadn't before. We learned that love isn't just about the good times. It's about weathering the storms together and coming out stronger on the other side. So, here we are, imperfect, but enduring. And as we look to the future, we do so with hope, resilience, and a renewed sense of love. The journey continues, and we're ready to face it hand in hand.